The sound of the binder rings snapping open echoes in the silent courtroom. It's a cheap, plastic sound, but in this suffocating quiet, it sounds like a gunshot. 3 sharp clicks.
1, 2,
3. I watch Mark's face. My husband. Soon to be my ex-husband. He's sitting beside his lawyer, a man with a smile so slick it looks like it was shellacked onto his face. Mark isn't smiling. He's watching me, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. Annoyance? Pity? It doesn't matter anymore. His lawyer had just finished a 10-minute monologue about the sanctity of marriage, the tragedy of human error, and Mark's profound, soul-deep remorse for his single, regrettable, isolated lapse in judgment. Lapse in judgment. That's what they were calling her. The judge, a woman with tired eyes and a stack of files that speaks to 1,000 other broken lives, looks at me over her glasses. "Mrs. Davies," she says, her voice patient but firm. "Your response?" I don't look at the judge. I look at Mark. I let the silence stretch, let him feel the weight of every eye in this room. His jaw is tight. A little muscle flexes, a nervous tick I know he gets when he's cornered. For 5 years, I would have reached out and soothed it with my thumb. Now, the sight of it makes my stomach clench with something cold and hard. I slide the first page out of the binder. It's a glossy, large-format print of a single credit card statement. I place it on the polished wood of the witness stand, my hand steady. "It wasn't just one night," I say, my voice clear and low. It doesn't even tremble. I'm surprised by that. I thought it would. I thought I would fall apart. But I am not the woman I was 6 months ago. That woman is dead and gone. I am something new. Something he created. The silence in that room was a living thing, heavy and breathless. If you've ever felt the air suck out of a room like that, the kind of quiet that's louder than a scream, tell me in the comments. I read all of them. And if you're new here, please subscribe. It helps me share these stories and reminds me that none of us are ever truly alone in the quiet. It started with the smell of sawdust and fresh paint. That was the smell of our future. Our house, a charming but neglected 2-story Victorian we'd bought with every penny we had, was our shared project, our baby. We spent weekends covered in drywall dust, arguing playfully over paint swatches and tile samples. Mark was good with his hands. He could fix anything. I loved watching him work, the concentration on his face as he measured a piece of trim, the muscles in his forearms flexing as he hammered a nail. We were a team. He was the builder, I was the designer. He'd lay the floorboards, and I'd be right behind him with a thermos of coffee and a kiss on his dusty cheek. "What do you think, babe?" he'd ask, stepping back to admire a newly hung door. Perfectly level. Just like us. And we were. Or so I thought. Our life was a carefully constructed thing of beauty. We had our routines. Tuesday was pasta night. Friday was for cheap wine and a movie on the couch, my legs tangled with his. On Sundays, we'd go to the flea market, hunting for old furniture to restore for the house. We had a 5-year plan, a 10-year plan. Kids were in the 10-year plan after the house was finished and we'd had a chance to travel. We were going to see Italy. He promised to build me a bookcase that covered an entire wall, just like in Beauty and the Beast, my favorite movie. Our love felt solid, foundational. It was in the way he'd bring me a cup of tea in the morning, just the way I liked it, without me having to ask. It was in the way I'd pack his lunch for work, always with a stupid little note tucked inside. It was comfortable, easy, and I mistook that comfort for unbreakable strength. I trusted him with a completeness that feels naive now, almost foolish. He was my partner, my best friend, the other half of my soul. I never once questioned where he was or who he was with. Why would I? He was with me, even when he wasn't. Our lives were so intertwined, I couldn't tell where I ended and he began. The first crack in that foundation wasn't a dramatic earthquake. It was a hairline fracture, almost invisible. He had to go on a last-minute business trip to a conference in the city, 2 hours away. It was just for one night. He hated these things, he said. Boring seminars and stuffy hotel rooms. He called me from the hotel that night, his voice tired. "I miss you," he'd said. "Wish you were here. This place is dead." "I miss you too," I'd replied, curled up on our couch, the space beside me feeling vast and cold. "Hurry home." "Always," he'd whispered. He came home the next day, bringing me a box of fancy chocolates from a shop near the hotel. He was apologetic, attentive, a little too eager to please. I chalked it up to him feeling guilty for leaving me alone for a night. He held me tight that evening, told me he loved me more than anything. I believed him. Of course, I did. The truth arrived a week later, not in a clandestine phone call or a lipstick-stained collar, but in a thin paper envelope with a bank logo on it. It was the credit card statement. I usually paid the bills, and I was just going through the motions, highlighting the charges for groceries, gas, the new power saw he'd bought for the renovation. And then I saw it. A charge from the Plaza Regency Hotel. The name was right. The date was right. But the charge wasn't for a standard room. It was for the romance package, and underneath it, a separate charge from the hotel's upscale restaurant. La Fleur. The total was over $800. For a boring business trip. For one person. My blood went cold. It was a detail, a small, insignificant thing, but it was wrong. Mark was frugal. He would never spend that kind of money on a work trip, especially not on himself. I stared at the paper, my heart starting a frantic, panicked rhythm against my ribs. Romance package. The words seemed to mock me. I waited for him to get home from work, the statement sitting on the kitchen island like an unexploded bomb. The hours crawled by. I went over it in my head 100 times. There had to be an explanation. A mistake. A work colleague he'd shared the room with to save money, and they'd accidentally put the wrong package on his bill. Yes, that had to be it. I was being crazy. Paranoid. He walked in, smiling, dropping a kiss on my forehead. "Hey, babe. Smells good. What's for dinner?" I couldn't speak. I just pointed at the piece of paper. He picked it up. I watched his face as he read it. The easy smile faltered just for a second. A flicker of something, panic, crossed his eyes before it was replaced by a look of weary confusion. "Oh, this," he said, tossing it back on the counter with a dismissive wave. "It's a screw-up. They overcharged me. I've been meaning to call them about it." "The romance package, Mark?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "And a $200 dinner at La Fleur?" He sighed, a great, theatrical exhalation of breath, as if I was being incredibly difficult. "Look, my boss was there. He took a few of us out to dinner to thank us. He told me to put it on the company card, which is this one. As for the room, I don't know, it's what they gave me. I didn't even notice. I was exhausted. I just went to sleep." It sounded plausible. Almost. But there was a hollowness to it. A practiced smoothness that set my teeth on edge. I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to believe him more than anything. To just let it go, to accept his explanation and go back to our life, to the smell of sawdust and the promise of Italy. But I couldn't. "Your boss's name is David Miller, right?" I asked, my phone already in my hand. Mark's face tightened. "What are you doing?" "I'm just going to call him. To clear this up. So I can stop being crazy." My hands were shaking as I looked up his number in Mark's contacts. He snatched the phone from my hand. His eyes were cold, angry. "Don't be ridiculous, Sarah. You're not going to bother my boss at home because you're feeling insecure. It was a work dinner. End of story." And that's when I knew. It was the anger. The way he turned it on me made me the villain. The way he called me insecure. It was a wall slamming down between us. He wasn't trying to reassure me. He was trying to silence me. The fight that followed was ugly. I pushed, he deflected. I cried, he got angry. Finally, cornered and exhausted, he collapsed onto the couch, his head in his hands. "Okay," he breathed, the fight going out of him. "You're right. It wasn't a work dinner." I held my breath, bracing myself. "I met someone," he said, his voice muffled by his hands. "At the hotel bar. We had a drink. We talked. One thing led to another. We went up to my room. He looked up at me then, his eyes filled with what I thought was real, gut-wrenching remorse. Tears were streaming down his face. It was just one night, Sarah. A stupid, meaningless mistake. It meant nothing. I was lonely. I had too much to drink. It was a moment of weakness. It will never, ever happen again. You have to believe me. It was just one night. One night. The words hung in the air between us. My world, the solid, level, beautiful world we had built together, tilted on its axis and then shattered into a million pieces. I looked at the man I loved, the man I had trusted with my entire life, and I saw a stranger. A stranger who had taken our future and treated it like it was disposable. The sawdust suddenly smelled like rot. The paint on the walls seemed to be mocking me. I crumpled to the floor, the sound of my own sobs filling the half-finished rooms of our broken home. In the days that followed, I existed in a fog of grief. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. Every corner of the house, every piece of furniture we'd bought together, felt tainted. Mark was a ghost in our home, floating around me with pathetic, pleading eyes. He was endlessly apologetic. He brought me flowers, which I left to wilt on the counter. He cooked my favorite meals, which I couldn't bring myself to eat. He tried to hold me, but I would flinch away from his touch. His hands, the hands I had loved to watch, the hands that were building our home, now felt like the hands of a stranger. "Please, Sarah," he'd beg, his voice raw. "Talk to me. Let me fix this. It was one mistake. Don't let one stupid night destroy everything we have. Everything we have." The words were a bitter pill. What did we have? A half-finished house and a foundation of lies. But a part of me, a desperate, foolish part, wanted to believe him. I had invested my entire adult life in this man, in this relationship. The thought of throwing it all away was terrifying. Was it possible to forgive a single mistake? Could we rebuild from this? We started going to counseling. Our therapist, a kind woman named Dr. Anya Sharma, listened patiently as we told our story. Or rather, as Mark told his. He was a master of remorse. He cried. He talked about his deep shame, his fear of losing me, his commitment to earning back my trust. He said all the right words. He admitted fault. He didn't make excuses for his behavior. He promised complete transparency from now on. He was, by all accounts, the perfect penitent husband. I sat beside him on the therapy couch, a silent, frozen statue. I wanted to believe the words coming out of his mouth. I watched him, searching his face for a flicker of the man I married. Sometimes I thought I saw him, but mostly I saw a performance. It was too polished, too perfect. He never stumbled over his words. His apologies felt rehearsed. Dr. Sharma encouraged us to communicate, to rebuild intimacy. She gave us exercises. We were supposed to spend quality time together, to have date nights. We tried. We went to a movie, and I spent the entire 2 hours staring at the screen, not registering a single frame. We went to our favorite restaurant, and the food tasted like ash in my mouth. He would reach for my hand across the table, his expression hopeful, and I would let him take it, but my hand would just lie there in his, limp and cold. He suggested we start working on the house again. "It'll be good for us," he said, his voice bright with forced enthusiasm, "to get back to our project, to build something together again." I agreed, because I didn't have the energy to argue. We spent a Saturday putting up crown molding in the living room. The familiar routine felt grotesque. He measured, I held the other end of the board. He hammered, I watched. The silence between us was thick with unspoken words. He tried to bridge it with small talk. "Remember when we first bought this place?" he said, not looking at me. "How we thought that weird wallpaper in the kitchen was a deal-breaker." I didn't answer. I just held the molding steady, my arms aching. He kept trying. I was thinking for the spare bedroom. Maybe that pale blue we liked? The one that looks like a robin's egg. That was supposed to be the nursery. We had picked out the color together, months ago, dreaming of the future. Hearing him say it now, so casually, felt like a slap in the face. My hands trembled. "I need a break," I said, dropping my end of the molding. It clattered to the floor. I walked out of the room, out of the house, and just stood in the backyard, breathing in the cold air, trying not to scream.
He didn't follow me.
The doubt was a constant low-grade fever, a persistent hum beneath the surface of our carefully reconstructed life. His story of the one night had holes in it, tiny inconsistencies that I kept snagging my thoughts on. He said he'd been at the hotel bar, but the charge from Loeffler was timed at 9:30 p.m. The hotel bar closed at 9. He said he'd had too much to drink, but he'd driven home the next morning at 8 a.m. Mark was meticulous about not driving after drinking, even the next day. I started to look, not because I wanted to find anything, but because I needed to prove to myself that I was crazy, that my paranoia was just a symptom of my own inability to forgive and move on, as he so gently suggested. I needed to prove him right so we could finally put this behind us. It started with his phone. He had promised transparency, offered me his password. "Look whenever you want," he'd said with a magnanimous sweep of his hand. I have nothing to hide, and he was right. His phone was clean.
Spotless.
There were no strange numbers, no suspicious texts, no hidden apps. It was too clean. It felt scrubbed, sanitized for my viewing. The arguments became a regular feature of our lives. They were quiet, tense affairs, usually ending with him sighing in frustration. "Sarah, we've been over this," he'd say, his voice laced with a pained patience that made me want to claw my own skin off. "I told you everything. What more do you want from me? I'm trying here. I'm going to therapy. I'm doing everything you and Dr. Sharma ask. But you won't let it go. It's like you want to be miserable." He was so good at it, so convincing. He would turn my pain into a weapon against me, recasting my grief as a stubborn refusal to heal. He made me feel like I was the one breaking us, my suspicion the cancer eating away at our second chance. Dr. Sharma, bless her, tried to mediate. She talked about the trauma of betrayal, how trust is not easily rebuilt. But even she was swayed by his performance. I could see it in her sympathetic glances towards him, this poor man who was trying so hard to make amends with his hysterical, unforgiving wife. I was being difficult. I was the problem. The house renovation ground to a halt. The living room was a mess of tools and half-finished molding. The spare bedroom remained a bare, sad room, its walls the color of old plaster and broken promises. The house, our shared dream, was becoming a mausoleum for our marriage. We were living in the ruins, pretending we could still build a life there. One evening, a friend of his, Kevin, came over to borrow a tool. Mark was in the shower. Kevin and I were making small talk in the kitchen. He was a nice guy, a bit of a loudmouth but harmless. "So," he said, leaning against the counter, "Mark tells me you guys are heading to the coast for your anniversary next month. That's awesome. You guys deserve a break. Is it that little inn you went to last year? The one in Cannon Beach?" I froze, my hand hovering over the coffee maker. Our anniversary was next month, but we had no plans to go to the coast. We hadn't discussed it, and we had never been to an inn in Cannon Beach. Not together, anyway. I forced a smile. "Oh, you know Mark. Always jumping the gun on planning." Kevin laughed. "Yeah, that's him. He was raving about that place. Said the view was incredible. He showed me pictures on his phone. Looked amazing." My heart felt like a block of ice in my chest. "Pictures?" "Yeah, you know. Sunsets, the beach." There was a cute one of a sea lion on a rock. He frowned slightly. "Actually, now that I think about it, I didn't see you in any of them."
Huh.
Weird. The shower upstairs turned off. "Well, it was great seeing you, Kevin," I said, practically shoving the tool he needed into his hands and steering him toward the door. "We'll talk soon." I closed the door behind him and leaned against it, my body shaking. He showed him pictures. Pictures on his phone from a trip I was never on. A trip to a romantic inn on the coast. Last year. The clean phone. The scrubbed call logs. The deleted messages. It wasn't about transparency. It was about erasing a history that was much longer than one night. That evening, I didn't confront him. I didn't cry. I didn't do anything but watch him. I watched him as he ate dinner, talking about his day at work. I watched him as he sat on the couch, scrolling through his pristine phone. I watched him as he slept beside me in our bed, his breathing even and deep, the picture of a man with a clear conscience. And I felt nothing. The love, the grief, the desperate hope, it was all gone. It had been scoured out of me, and in its place was a vast, cold emptiness. And in that emptiness, a single, hard thought took root. It wasn't about saving our marriage anymore. It was about saving myself. The shift inside me was seismic. The grief didn't vanish, but it crystallized into something else. Something hard and sharp. It became fuel. The woman who cried on the therapist's couch, who hoped for a miracle, was gone. In her place was an architect of a different kind. I was no longer interested in building a home with him. I was going to dismantle his lies, brick by brick, until his entire fabricated world collapsed around him. The first step was to play the part. I had to become the wife he wanted me to be, the healing, forgiving wife. The next morning, I woke up before him and made coffee. I brought him a cup in bed, just like I used to. I smiled. "I've been thinking," I said, sitting on the edge of the bed. "You're right. I haven't been fair to you. You're trying, and I've been stuck. I want to move forward. With you." The relief that washed over his face was so profound it was almost comical. He pulled me into a hug, burying his face in my hair. "Oh, Sarah," he murmured. "Thank you. You have no idea how much I needed to hear that. I promise you won't regret this. We're going to be okay. Better than okay." I closed my eyes and let him hold me, my body rigid, my mind cold and clear as glass. The performance had begun. I needed access. Not to the phone he carried with him, the one he so generously offered up for inspection. I needed the ghosts of his digital life. I remembered he had an old laptop stored in the attic, one he hadn't used in a couple of years since his work had given him a new one. He was a digital hoarder, never deleting anything. I gambled on the idea that his carelessness might extend to his secrets. That weekend, while he was out on a long bike ride, part of his new healthy living, clear mind kick, I went into the attic. It was dusty and hot, filled with boxes of old memories that now seemed to belong to another lifetime. I found the laptop under a pile of old blankets. My heart hammered as I brought it down to the kitchen and plugged it in. It whirred to life, a relic from a happier time. I held my breath, praying he hadn't wiped it. His password was the same as it had always been, the name of the street we'd lived on when we first met. Maplewood 7. My fingers trembled as I typed it in. The desktop flickered into view, cluttered with old files and photos. And there, in the bottom right corner, was a little icon for a cloud storage service I didn't recognize. His browser had auto-saved the login. With a single click, I was in. And there it was. His entire secret life, laid out in neat digital folders. It wasn't one night. It was 2 years.
2
years. Her name was Chloe. There were folders of pictures of them together. At the inn in Cannon Beach that Kevin had mentioned. On a ski trip in Whistler he'd claimed was a team-building retreat, at fancy restaurants, at concerts, on hiking trails. They were smiling, kissing, their arms wrapped around each other. They looked happy. They looked like us, in the before time. There were receipts, scanned copies of hotel bills, flight confirmations, jewelry store receipts, a diamond bracelet for her birthday, a weekend spa package for their anniversary, and then I found the financial statements. He had a separate bank account, a secret one, and he'd been funding it by siphoning money from our joint savings account. Small amounts at first, a few $100s here and there, disguised as cash withdrawals for materials for the house. But the amounts grew larger over time. He was stealing from our future, from our dream home, to build a life with her. I felt a strange sense of calm as I scrolled through the evidence. The shock was gone, replaced by a chilling clarity. This wasn't a man who made a mistake. This was a man who had been living a calculated, methodical lie for years. He hadn't just cheated. He had committed a profound and systematic betrayal on every possible level, emotional, financial, and spiritual. I spent the rest of the day downloading everything. I copied every file, every photo, every receipt onto a new, encrypted hard drive. I created a spreadsheet, a timeline. I cross-referenced the dates of his secret trips with his work calendar and our shared social calendar. The business conference, the boys' weekend, the family emergency that required him to visit his sick aunt, an aunt who I now realized had been perfectly healthy. Every lie was a line item in my spreadsheet. When he came home from his bike ride, flushed and happy, I was in the kitchen, calmly preparing dinner. "Hey," he said, kissing my cheek. "Feels good to be back on track, doesn't it?" I smiled at him, a dead, hollow thing. It really does. Living with him in the weeks that followed was the hardest thing I have ever done. I had to be two people at once. On the surface, I was the wife who was trying. We went to therapy, and I talked about my progress. I told Dr. Sharma I was starting to feel hopeful again. I let Mark hold my hand. We even started working on the house again, and I feigned enthusiasm as we painted the spare bedroom that pale robin's egg blue. Every stroke of the roller felt like a lie. Underneath, I was a machine. Late at night, after he was asleep, I would be in my small home office, the glow of the monitor illuminating my face. I hired a divorce lawyer, a woman named Ms. Albright, a shark in a sensible pantsuit. I met with her in secret, on my lunch breaks.
I showed her the hard drive.
Her eyebrows shot up as she scrolled through the files. "Well," she said, a grim smile on her face. "He certainly made this easy for us." Financial infidelity is a powerful tool in a divorce settlement, Sarah. Especially when it's this blatant. Mark, meanwhile, was basking in his perceived victory. He thought he had won. He had his wife back, his comfortable life was secure, and his secrets were safe. He became more relaxed, more confident. He even became a little patronizing, offering me gentle advice on letting go of anger and embracing forgiveness. He was so sure of himself, so blissfully unaware of the storm that was gathering. He was a man standing on a trapdoor, admiring the view, while I was downstairs, my hand on the lever. The final piece of the puzzle fell into my lap by pure chance. I was organizing the files I downloaded and found a folder labeled Project Evergreen. I assumed it was work-related. But inside, it wasn't spreadsheets or presentations. It was architectural blueprints. A floor plan for a beautiful, modern, 4-bedroom house. And in the corner of the blueprint, in the client information box, were two names, Mark Davies and Chloe Thorne. There were email chains with a realtor discussing plots of land in a new development on the other side of the state. There were emails with a builder discussing custom finishes and timelines. The down payment for the land, I discovered with a fresh wave of nausea, had been made 3 months ago from their secret joint account. An account funded by my inheritance from my grandmother, which I had deposited into our savings to be used for our dream kitchen renovation. He wasn't just having an affair. He wasn't just stealing our money. He was building a new life, a new house, a new future with her, using the wreckage of ours as his foundation. He was literally taking the money meant for our home and using it to build a home with someone else. That was it. That was the moment my last shred of hesitation vanished. There was no more room for doubt, no more what-ifs. There was only the cold, hard certainty of what I had to do. The next day, I had him served with divorce papers.
He was at work.
I had the server deliver them to his office, right in the middle of a team meeting. I wanted it to be public. I wanted it to be humiliating. He came home that night in a state of utter disbelief, the papers clutched in his hand. His face was a mask of confusion and betrayal. It was a masterful performance. "What is this?" he demanded, his voice shaking with manufactured hurt. "Sarah, what is this? I thought we were okay. I thought we were working on things." I was sitting at the kitchen island, the same spot where he had confessed his one night. I didn't get up. I just looked at him, my expression unreadable. "We were never okay, Mark," I said calmly. His confusion morphed into anger.
"So this is it?
"After all my work, all my apologies, you're just going to throw it all away over one mistake? One stupid night? This is insane. You're being vindictive." He had locked himself into his lie. It was his only defense, the narrative he had so carefully constructed. He clung to it like a life raft. You'll regret this, Sarah, he snarled, his face turning ugly. I'm not going to let you destroy my life and take everything I've worked for because you can't forgive me. I'll fight you. You'll get nothing. I think you'll find, I said, my voice as cold and quiet as the grave, that I already have everything I need. He hired the slick lawyer, the one who specialized in making cheating husbands look like misunderstood saints and their wives look like greedy, hysterical shrews. The battle lines were drawn. He was going to paint me as the villain, the unstable wife who couldn't move past a single, isolated incident. He was going to use my grief against me. He had no idea what was coming. He thought he was fighting the woman who cried on the therapy couch. He was about to meet the woman who spent her nights building a timeline of his downfall. He thought he was bringing a knife to a gunfight. He didn't realize I had already built the gallows. And that brings us back to the courtroom. The slick lawyer is on his feet, objecting. Your Honor, this is hardly relevant. My client has admitted to a single, deeply regretted indiscretion. Mrs. Davies is attempting to sensationalize this unfortunate event for financial gain. The judge looks at the credit card statement I've placed before her. The one for the Plaza Regency, with its romance package and its $200 dinner for two. Overruled, Mr. Gable, she says, her voice dry. I'd like to see where Mrs. Davies is going with this. Please proceed. I look at Mark. His face is pale. That little muscle in his jaw is going crazy. I slide the next page from my binder. It's another statement. From a different credit card. The one he didn't know I knew about. This one is for the ocean view in Cannon Beach. The date is from our 4th wedding anniversary. The weekend he told me he had to go on a mandatory corporate retreat. This was your corporate retreat, Mark? I ask, my voice echoing in the silence. I don't wait for an answer. I place the next exhibit down. It's a printout of an email. From him to Chloe. The subject line is, our anniversary. The email reads, can't wait to celebrate another year with you, my love. This place is going to be perfect. Mark's lawyer is up again, sputtering objections. The judge just waves a dismissive hand at him. Sit down, Mr. Gable. I continue. Page after page. Evidence by evidence. I am calm. Methodical. I am an avalanche in slow motion. A receipt for a diamond bracelet from Tiffany's, purchased on my birthday. I got a new set of dish towels that year. Flight confirmations to Whistler. A ski trip for two. He told me he was visiting his sick aunt. I put down a photo I'd found on Chloe's public social media page. It's a picture of them on a ski lift, bundled in winter gear, beaming at the camera. Their faces are flushed with cold and happiness. With each new piece of evidence, a little more color drains from Mark's face. He's shrinking in his chair, his confident posture collapsing. He keeps shaking his head, muttering under his breath.
He won't look at me.
He won't look at the judge. He's staring at the table, as if he can will it all to disappear. I present the bank statements from their secret account. I show the highlighted transfers from our joint savings. The small thefts that grew into a torrent. I can hear a low gasp from my mother, who is sitting in the back of the courtroom. Mark's lawyer tries to spin it. Your Honor, my client is a generous man. He was helping a friend who was in a difficult financial situation. It was misguided, perhaps, but not malicious. A friend. He was calling her a friend. A friend, I say, my voice rising for the first time. I look directly at Mark, forcing him to meet my gaze. His eyes are wide with panic. Is that what you call the woman you were building a house with? And then I pull out the final exhibit. The centerpiece of my entire case. I haven't even shown it to my own lawyer. I wanted this moment for myself. It's not a piece of paper. It's a large foam core board, the kind used for school projects. On it is a timeline. 2 years of his life, my life, their life. It's all there, in excruciating detail. On the top half, in blue ink, is our life. My life. Doctor's appointments. Family dinners. Weekends spent sanding floors. Our anniversary, which we celebrated with a pizza because money was tight, my birthday. The day I had a miscarriage, a secret we'd kept to ourselves, a day he'd held me while I cried and told me we'd get through it together. On the bottom half, in red ink, is his other life. Chloe's life. Every trip, every expensive dinner, every gift. All perfectly aligned with the dates on the top. The weekend of my miscarriage, while I was at home, bleeding and broken, there is a red entry. A credit card charge for a $500 dinner at a Michelin-starred restaurant. The day he was supposedly at a funeral for a work colleague, there is a red entry. 2 tickets to a U2 concert. The week he was working late every night to meet a deadline, there are red entries. A string of charges from a boutique hotel near his office. The timeline is a brutal, undeniable tapestry of his deceit. The 2 lives, running in parallel, woven together by his lies and our money. I place the board on an easel facing the judge, but angled so the entire courtroom can see. The slick lawyer is silent. He just stares at it, his mouth slightly agape. He knows he's lost. He knows his client is not just a cheater. He is a monster. But I'm not done. And finally, Your Honor, I say, my voice ringing with a terrible clarity. The reason money was so tight. The reason we couldn't afford to finish our kitchen. The reason we couldn't afford a vacation for our own anniversary. I unroll the blueprints. The large, professional architectural drawings for Project Evergreen. I lay them out over the witness stand, the paper crinkling loudly in the stunned silence. I point to the client box. Mark Davies and Chloe Thorne. I read aloud. He wasn't just having an affair, Your Honor. He was liquidating our shared assets, our shared future, including a significant portion of my own inheritance, to build a new life, a new house, with his mistress. I look at Mark. He is staring at the blueprints, his face ashen. He looks from the blueprints to the timeline, his eyes darting back and forth like a trapped animal. The 2 pieces of his life, the one he lived and the one he was building, laid bare for everyone to see. The careful compartmentalization he had maintained for 2 years, shattered in an instant. The walls came down. All of them. His breath starts coming in ragged, shallow gasps. He looks at his lawyer, but the man won't meet his eyes. He looks at the judge, who is staring at him with an expression of cold disgust. He looks at me, and in his eyes, I see the full, crushing weight of his ruin. He has nowhere left to run. No lies left to tell. And then he opens his mouth. But it's not a word that comes out. It's a sound. A raw, guttural, animal sound of pure agony and utter defeat. It's not a yell of anger. It's a scream of annihilation. The sound of a man watching his entire world burn to the ground, knowing he was the one who lit the match. The sound of a soul being ripped apart. It fills the courtroom, that terrible, final sound of his undoing. And then, he slumps forward in his chair, his head in his hands, his body racked with silent, convulsive sobs. The great actor had finally run out of lines. The gavel came down with a sharp crack, but I barely heard it. The judge's words were a distant hum. Financial malfeasance, dissipation of marital assets, awarded in full, the legal terms floated past me. Ms. Albright was patting my shoulder, a triumphant smile on her face. Mark was being led out of the courtroom by his stunned lawyer, his face pale and vacant, a hollowed-out man. He didn't look at me as he left. He couldn't. I won. By every legal definition, I had won a total victory. I got the house. I got back the money he had stolen from my inheritance, and then some. I got everything I had asked for. But as I walked out of the courthouse into the bright, indifferent sunlight, I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vindicated or joyful. The cold, hard rage that had fueled me for months had burned itself out, leaving behind a vast, quiet emptiness. I felt nothing. Just tired. Bone-deep tired. My mother rushed to my side, hugging me tight. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered, her own voice thick with tears. "You are so strong." Was I strong? Or was I just broken in a way that looked like strength from the outside? I had become a detective, an archivist of my own heartbreak. I had traded my grief for a spreadsheet. It had served its purpose. It had gotten me through. But now, in the quiet aftermath, the grief I had kept at bay for so long began to seep back in, soft and gray like a fog. I drove home alone. To my house. Not our house.
Meaning.
I walked through the front door, and the silence was absolute. The half-finished living room, the cans of paint, the scattered tools, it all looked different now. It was no longer a monument to a broken marriage. It was just a mess. A project waiting to be started. Or abandoned. I walked into the spare bedroom, the one we had painted that pale, hopeful blue. The color of a robin's egg. The color of a promise. I ran my hand along the smooth, cool wall. For 2 years, he had stood in this very house discussing paint colors and light fixtures with me, while he was simultaneously emailing a realtor about a different house, a different life. He had held my hand and talked about our future, knowing it was a lie. The sheer audacity of it still staggered me. I spent the first few weeks in a daze, moving through the empty rooms like a ghost. I packed up his things. Every shirt, every book, every photograph. I was methodical, unemotional. I piled the boxes in the garage. He sent a friend to pick them up. We never spoke again. The emptiness of the house was suffocating at first. Every creak of the floorboards, every hum of the refrigerator was a reminder of his absence. But slowly, gradually, something began to shift. The silence began to feel less like a void and more like peace. The emptiness began to feel less like a loss and more like space.
Space to breathe. Space to think.
Space to be. One Saturday morning, I woke up and the sun was streaming through the windows. I made myself a cup of coffee and stood in the middle of the disastrous living room. I looked at the half-hung crown molding, the drop cloths still crumpled on the floor. For months, I had seen it as a symbol of failure. But now I saw something else. I saw a blank canvas. I went to the garage, pulled out the toolbox, his toolbox, now my toolbox, and found a crowbar. I went back to the living room and, with a grunt of effort, I pried off the first piece of molding he had hung. It came away with a satisfying crack. I pulled off another and another. I spent the entire day undoing his work. I tore out the floorboards we had laid together. I scraped the paint samples off the walls. I was unbuilding our life. I was demolishing the past. It was hard physical work. My muscles ached. My hands were raw. But with every piece of the old life I tore away, I felt a little bit lighter. I wasn't erasing him. I was clearing the ground. That night, I sat on the bare subfloor of my empty living room, covered in dust and sweat, and I cried. Not for him. Not for the marriage I had lost. I cried for the woman I had been, the naive, trusting girl who believed in 5-year plans and forever. I cried for the pain and the betrayal. And I cried with a strange, fierce relief. I was alone. I was in a wrecked house. And for the first time in a very long time, I felt free. The next day, I hired a contractor. A woman with a no-nonsense attitude and a brilliant portfolio. We walked through the house together, and I told her my vision. Not our vision.
Meaning.
I wanted to knock down a wall. Open up the kitchen. I wanted a built-in bookcase, the one he had promised me, but I would have it built for myself. I wanted to paint the walls in bold, vibrant colors he would have hated. The house is still a work in progress. It probably always will be. But now, the smell of sawdust is the smell of my own creation. The sound of hammering is the sound of my future being built, nail by nail. I found strength I never knew I had, not in revenge, but in reclamation. The timeline in the courtroom was my victory. This quiet, dusty, hopeful life I am building with my own 2 hands. That house holds a lot of ghosts. But now it also holds a lot of promise. Thanks for being here with me through this. Subscribing helps bring more of these stories to life. Stories of finding our way out of the ruins.